Welcome to the 58th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman along with Scott Beck. Scott, we got to talk about this. Watched the Grandview versus William Penn duel online. They did a good job of having a broadcast. If you want to just look at a prototype of what a good dual meet should look like from a production end, you need to watch William Penn Wrestling. They do a great job of really hyping things up and making it look like a show. It was number 2 versus number 3. William Penn dominated 29-14. There were some starters out for Grandview, so of course, early season, you're not going to see everything top to bottom. What we need to talk about is how important quality, knowledgeable, insightful commentary is, especially for women's wrestling. I've seen this as a trend. You get some of these colleges and they have the college kids do the play-by-play and the color, and they don't know necessarily wrestling, and then they don't know women's wrestling, and they don't know some of the backstory. So as an example here, you have a match at 124 pounds. Victoria Baez-Delone won by tech over Katie Campbell 10-0. The ranking said number 9 Victoria Baez-Delone versus number 2 Katie Campbell. They went off of that and they were shocked. They said, this is unbelievable. Number 9 versus number 2. She's dominating her. She won by tech fall, almost like this is unheard of. If we were doing it and we knew that, we would say, we think that Victoria Baez-Delone is the favorite because she was a national finalist for King. She transferred. None of that was mentioned. And all
She's
this
made multiple world teams for Spain. I mean, we know her very well, and she's been at wrestling at the senior level competitively for at least 5 years.
Exactly. And that backstory wasn't brought into the commentary. So I would do the same thing if I was doing another sport that I didn't get checked in on. And there's even times where you get thrust into calling Greco-Roman and I don't know everything intimately. And there may be things that I need to be brought up on the backstory. So this can happen. However, when you have time to prepare, you should know detail by detail of what happened, even if you aren't an expert in the sport, because it really does create the narrative of what's happening in a dual meet. So if you don't know and you think, wow, number 9 versus number 2, what a huge upset, it really wasn't, because Victoria Baez-Delone was the favorite going into that.
Yeah, I mean, it gets a little touchy, right? Because on one hand, we're supposed to be so thankful that we're having these matches, on video, that we're having commentary. And then I come off as like just a snobby jerk if I say that commentary is horrible or this person shouldn't be doing this. They don't know what they're talking about. And then some people would say, well, it's better than nothing to have some commentary as opposed to none. I'd rather have no commentary than uneducated or clueless commentary. I hate when somebody's just reading from a sheet. It also depends like who it is. If it's like somebody that really knows wrestling but doesn't know that level per se and is doing a favor and it's a big name. Like, for example, if we jump Jordan Burroughs that might not know the college athletes, but it was Jordan Burroughs doing it, I like having Jordan Burroughs or Terry Steiner. They may not know every nuance, but you have to have something. If you literally don't know the athletes, don't know the sport, and really don't know the rules, then I'd rather have nothing. But sometimes you take what you can get. I mean, it's kind of a touchy situation because then you complain, then you're just a jerk that complains about everything. So, it's like the camera thing. If, should you complain if it's a bad camera? Would you rather not watch a match or watch it and squint and barely see anything? So I don't know. I just think it's one of these things that as we develop and as the sport keeps growing, we'll get better and better commentary. And I'm going to set myself up for trouble here because I'm not like really a commentator. I've done it, but if anybody's ever really desperate at a tournament and then there's a way I can video in, I'm happy to commentate randomly for something if it ever helps.
But you're right, this is touchy because at some level you need to get experience doing this too, so that there's some sort of a progression to get involved. So you don't want to cut people off, because I've been there too where, hey, I've messed up. In fact, last year at the Grandview versus William Penn, I made a mistake in the commentary about the criteria. I had it off. And then fortunately, the match went the way of not having to explain myself at the end if it would have gone that way. I know it. I messed up, but I still, hopefully, I know the sport and I know the details. But this situation, they were actually calling the referee an umpire, and there were just
Yeah,
things where you have to have some level. So as we go back to Reese Larramendy doing the Who's Number One, you saw what she did. She knows the sport intimately. And then everyone at Flow was raving about her preparation. They said when they
yeah.
came in the production meeting, she had studied, she had gone on and learned what their tendencies were, who the athletes were. So even if you don't know, you can prepare by knowing some things about the background.
Absolutely. Reese would be a hard benchmark to hold everybody to because she is number one. She's a very good wrestler, national champion. She's just high level. Number two, she wants to do this, and she is prepared. You and I have been on calls for her just before we talked about something, and she just knows her stuff and was very prepared. So that's a high benchmark, but we always like to shoot high, right? If you could have Reese many commentating on everything, it's fine. But I think in general, it's to your point. Like if the person doesn't know the sport at all, to me, it's like offensive. But if it's somebody that is in the sport or cares about the sport and is learning and maybe doesn't speak eloquently or just gets caught up in stuff or makes mistakes, that's fine. That's a process of growing and learning. So I'm much more forgiving if somebody is really trying and cares about the sport.
What you're talking about here is Geneva Gray, Victoria Carlson. They've been on the Fargo finals. They might not know every athlete intimately, and you're not going to, but they do a great job because they
Of
know the
course.
sport, they know the background, they've been through it, and so they can really speak to what's happening on the mat, which is a great situation for them.
Absolutely. And listen, it's not just in this sport, it's in everything. I mean, I ripped, I was a bond trader for a long time, and I rip into on CNN. Sometimes I'll bring somebody on TV, and it's offensive to people that want to really follow something and learn about it or get real information. So, I think, we're moving in the right direction. The fact that these things are getting telecasted is great. Can we improve on some of the commentary and camera stuff? Absolutely. But my patience with it and willingness is so much more latitude to somebody that just really wants to do it and is learning and just, upcoming.
Good news for you because you have complained about this, you've ragged on it, and we finally got a text from Joe Norton saying you can let Scott know we got new cameras for the North
Love
Central
it.
Open. It is this weekend. It's one of the three big tournaments of the season. There's tons of entries. It's going to be off the charts, but let's hope that they have the cameras there. Even if it doesn't happen this tournament, even if they don't, they're in the process. So all of your
Or
complaining is helping. And if people only knew the Scott Beck off of the screen, this is a measured Scott Beck
they
on
don't
this
know the
show.
guarded version. They're only seeing the guarded version. No, but that's great, and I'm glad he's doing that. It'll only make it better. And the more people, if somebody looks to watch something and they can't see it that well, they may not be apt to. We want to build a fan base. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. I think it's going to make the event that much better. I'm really looking forward to watching it this weekend.
Let's not overlook how big of a win this was for William Penn because this sets up potentially a showdown between William Penn and Life. It should happen at the For Her duels and possibly at the national duels at the Unidome coming up in about a month. I think this is exciting. I think that looking on paper, William Penn is a better tournament team because you have the Olympians, you have Victoria Baez DeLone, you have some U17 world champions in Piper Fowler. You have some things set up for William Penn. So that's exciting, especially when Life University lost a couple of their stars to one to transfer portal, one is opting out of the season in NAIA Falcon. So I'm excited to see what that showdown looks like. I think NAI should be really excited about the brand right now and the potential showdown between those two teams.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I looked at you sent the results of the William Penn Grandview match, and William Penn has a very, very solid lineup. I mean, is there a couple of gaps, some small gaps, perhaps? But like you're saying, they certainly have a great tournament team. But as a dual meet team, I mean, they have like you go Ogiskaya, then Baez DeLone, then Kendall Boswell, Devin Patton, Kolawale. That's a solid patch there. I mean, and then you have Fowler coming in near the top. I mean, they have a really impressive team, and they're gonna contend and they're gonna put pressure on life, and it's good. It's good. This just shows to the growth of the sport. William Penn College has a top to bottom solid team, and it's really good to see. And it's good for the NAIA. I'm excited.
Scott, I haven't gotten enough of the conversation about the developmental process and what that means and transitions and how difficult that can be. And it really applies to everything. Think about how many bands their first album is their best album because they're free, uninhibited. They don't have any of the production. None of the people are looking at that as $1 million signs and saying, hey, now that we got you, we're going to just go on. Now we have expectations that you need to make album after album after album. We have a system and a formula. It's just the idea that you're free. And I think back to even one of the best articles I ever wrote, the one that got the most buzz was when I took a month to do it. I didn't get paid a dime. I worked on it with Randy Lewis, and people would bring it up to me even years later because I had the time to just open my mind, work on it. I was in my 20s. It didn't matter. You post it out there, you can be funny. Now, when it's your job and it's regimented and there's expectations that we need content every week or every day, you don't have that opportunity to just say, we can just sit there and take a month and just create something awesome. And it's the same thing. Think about that when we talk about the high school situation. You're free, uninhibited. Parents are paying for everything. Now you go to college, you have a scholarship. You could lose your scholarship if you don't do things right. You have expectations on where you need to be with schoolwork, everything. So I just want to respect that transition and how difficult that can be to go to that next
It,
level.
it's exceptionally difficult. You're adjusting to other things as you move different levels, whether you're first, going to college but the other thing is a lot of times people, and this is like, the music analogy is a great one. You come out with a great first album like the Wallflowers, Bob Dylan's Kid Jacob, and then the second album was not as good. They were kind of free, and then people also then put a timeline like, oh, we got to do the second album within this time frame because you signed a contract. And I think here people may say they have early success, perhaps. Maybe somebody's a junior in high school wins a college tournament or places high at the U.S. Open or whatever, and they're like, okay, so next year I'm making the world team at whatever U23 or seeing, you start to create this time frame, and progress in anything in life is not linear. There's ups and downs. It could have to do with exogenous factors. It could have to do with just the dance of life. Sometimes people, in wrestling, it's another one where if you're not on somebody's radar, you're relaxed, you're free, nobody's really scouting you, you come out of nowhere, you beat some good people. Guess what? You get on their radar and they're studying every match you've ever wrestled that's available and looking at it. The coaches are coaching them to beat you. So it's hard. It's not linear. And I think people need to give themselves a break sometimes and not like try to have this formula. And it's very difficult though. When you say something, just relax. So don't worry. Don't, just whatever happens, happens. I got in a random aside. I'm just going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here with my friends this weekend because we're talking about the whole thing about after in football when Indiana upset, beat Ohio State in the Big Ten final game for the first championship in probably 80 years. And you had a lot of the guys that were interviewed, the quarterback and the receiver, and they were talking about, praising God and all this stuff. And my friends and I are texting God and this whole commentary where some people don't like that and some people are fine with it. But I think in wrestling, like you need something like having a belief in something that is bigger than you, that there's a plan. It almost allows you to be freer and say, whatever happens is part of the path. I'm going to grow from it and learn. And I don't know whether it has to be God, whether it has to be other interests, but if it's all you think about is winning and progressing and putting this pressure, it's really difficult. So having some outlet or some way of trying to put this in perspective, is very helpful. And it's hard. This puts a lot of pressure on people.
And I've heard about a way of thinking. It's called neutral thinking, that you're not thinking of wins and losses. It's all just neutral. It's part of the process. And there's a great book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. It's about the growth mindset. This is nothing new. This isn't like a revelation that I'm
Right.
bringing up here, but it's just the idea that you're always growing, always learning. And if you can just be in that learning zone where you say it's not about winning this match against X person. It's about what can I do technically. It's about how can I score points when I get in there. And you're excited about it. You're excited about the process. You're excited about making mistakes because when you do, you get to grow and learn from it. I just think the more of that mentality of this isn't, yeah, it's just you're not putting a burden on yourself that, oh, I lost,
Well,
it's the end of the world. It's the growth mindset.
well, and it's also funny where, like, on one hand, it is a sport about ego and about you and what you're doing, and the other hand is, there's a book called Zen and the Art of Archery where this guy's a Western is training with a Japanese archery master, and he's trying to learn, and the guy keeps saying wrong, wrong, and he's like, well, when am I going to get it right? When should I release the arrow? And the Zen master says, you don't release the arrow. The arrow releases itself when it's ready. And, an analogy in wrestling is it's not always saying, when do I hit this move? When do I hit that move? It's like if you train properly, you drill the moves, you work on it, you trust your training, the move hits itself when it's ready to be hit. You shouldn't go into a match necessarily saying, I'm going to hit this move now. I'm going to do this now. When it's ready, if you've prepared properly. So it's taking your ego out of it a little bit as well can help in a very egocentric sport.
But as we talk about just achieving that high level success early, I always go back to my favorite movie, Rocky. They made that in 28 days. It was on a shoestring budget. It was all in the moment. You hear Sylvester Stallone talk about there's actually a movie coming out called I Play Rocky. It's about the creation of the Rocky film and the Rocky franchise. But he talks about it. He was just free. Everything worked together. It was his peak moment. And then he talked about everyone had expectations, saying you're the next Marlon Brando and you won the Best Picture in 1977. And then everyone's saying you need to do more. And then the next couple movies were a bust. And then he had to learn from that and come out of it and create a different image out of it. But he had to go through some suffering after that. Guns N' Roses, their best
Yeah.
album, Appetite for Destruction. It's a masterpiece. But then you get overproduced, you don't have the flow and the rhythm. That's why it's unbelievable when you can have sustained success in any field, and why someone like Helen Maroulis is so amazing.
Yeah, and I also would add, like, Bruce Springsteen's first album, Greetings from Asbury Park. That was the first one, I believe. Yeah, and he's like, I don't know if I'm going to get to do another album, so I better, do all the imagery and all the things in my mind, just get it out. And it's like sometimes, like, you make like a world team trial final or a U.S. Open, you may never get there again. You don't know. To let it go, kind of just. And I think sometimes people's first time they can do that, and not feel as much pressure because they may not. Nobody has the like, to your point, you don't have the expectations. You can just be free, and and just it's way easier said than done. But you just never know what the plan is and where you're ever gonna be. So try to appreciate where you are and enjoy the moment, I guess.
As we talk about this, making the progress transition, especially as it relates to women's wrestling, I had a conversation with Kevin Black about this, who's an exceptional women's wrestling coach, really knows the sport. He was saying that in women's running, they really have done research about how women change and how their body type changes over the course of time. I'm just wondering why in women's wrestling are certain topics off limits a little bit. That if you are having a tough time making weight, they do have biological things that are happening.
Women, obviously, we have like our menstrual cycle. I would say that actually it plays a big role in wrestling just because it does happen every month. And having to deal with the weight cuts and even the workouts, it's just like it's hard on a woman's body sometimes. And I think that can like mentally be draining, like if you're having just like a difficult week with that.
These topics should be discussed in the proper way, of course, respectfully, and especially. I'm not going to get into that as much. I mean, I'm a father and I've seen those situations with my daughter, but, men are not the experts on some of these women things, but these topics should be able to be discussed, but it's a risk reward thing.
There's been a situation where there was a win and she didn't look good in the match. And she talked about how she had a hard time making weight because of her period. The coach said, would you cut that part out? I think that's just an important thing to be out there because it's not an excuse, but these things are happening and
they're real.
They're real. Why wouldn't you at some level say that this is happening and it's different than any other sport because you have to make weight?
It's also funny with the making weight thing where there's certain people that cut weight. Well, most people cut weight, okay, and some people are not secret about it, or when they're cutting weight right before a tournament, will do it in the common areas or go into the sauna. Other people will privately only cut weight and like go into hiding. You never see them. They don't want you. They don't want their opponents let them be seen like miserable or suffering. But everybody's kind of suffering a little bit. So it's just funny. Different people do different things. I do think you have to tread carefully though. And especially as a man, I'm not going in those directions on some of the controversial things because people can get offended and you just don't know who you're going to piss off.
But these are reasons as we're talking about
Yeah.
how there's just progressions and things change.
Yeah.
Things do change, and you're not in high school forever, and you don't have certain biological things forever. And so I just think the more you can talk about these and get in the open, because
Absolutely.
there is a struggle in transitions when you go to a next level. And I would love
Yeah.
to have a woman talk about those things so that we can
Absolutely.
open.
Or what about when like women have children and then come back to the sport? I mean, Adeline did it. Stadnik's done it. A lot of the Ukrainians have had kids. The cheetah is I think pregnant or having a kid. So it's interesting. What that's like. I can't address that because I don't know, but I think some other women and ladies would want to hear what that experience is like if they're thinking about doing it or how hard that is.
Scott, we do have a lot of great things happening at the Division One level of the sport. Lehigh hosted its first duels since becoming a sanctioned Division One wrestling program, hosted Delaware State and East Stroudsburg. They won both those duels, undefeated on the season. You see them building. I think that with the recruiting class they have coming in, they're only going to get better. But I think right now you have the big three. You have Audrey Jimenez, you have Abby Cooper, you have Aubrey Krazer. I think they're the highlight wrestlers of the team, and then they have some good wrestlers around them. But it was fun to be able to just tune in and see Lehigh having a Division One program. It was a good crowd. Of course, I love the name, the Snake Pit, and what that represents. Such a great venue, and this is a building block for great things to come.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Coach Marquez get interviewed after, and she talked about there's a crowd. They'd like it to be more. It's going to build, but that venue's phenomenal, and they will, as they build a program and awareness gets created, that will fill up. And I can't imagine when Lehigh's having Iowa comes to visit Lehigh and they wrestle in the Snake Pit or something. I mean, it's just going to be great. That is, they've had Who's Number One there a bunch of times, and it is just a great venue at Grace Hall. So that will be phenomenal. It was good to see, and I'm looking forward to seeing that place just packed.
Iowa wrestled Colorado Mesa and Oklahoma State's club program. So you have a D1 program, a D2 program, and a club program. As expected, Iowa dominated both the duels. Iowa defeated Colorado Mesa 36-8, and then Iowa defeated Oklahoma State 39-4. And actually surprised that Oklahoma State beat Colorado Mesa. Mesa didn't have its full lineup. Don't know the extent of that. Don't know if Travis Mercado was holding some of them out. I know Loriana Paesta wasn't there. She was a U20 world teamer
World Team member, yeah.
that did not participate because of injury, so she may be out. So not the best Colorado Mesa team you're going to see. But I will say, even if you look at the score, you see Iowa 39-4 over Oklahoma State. I still think Oklahoma State is better than I thought they would be. I was especially impressed at 131 pounds. Carly Brooks won by fall over Kaylee Benson. So this is one of those where equal parts admiration for both wrestlers. Kaylee Benson came out and wrestled a masterpiece of a match, looked phenomenal during the match until she got pinned. So credit Carly Brooks for staying in the match and getting the fall in the second period. Credit Kaylee Benson for really looking tough in that match. Molly Allen, who is from Iowa, wrestles for Oklahoma State. She won the match, the lone match for Oklahoma State. But just some good things for building block. And then I just liked that Daniela Nugent wrestled Kennedy Blade. She looks solid. I did not think she was going to wrestle 160, but you just look at her physically. She looks so good and so solid. She is not a 160 pounder during the season. I don't know if she's going to go back down, but she looked really solid. And I just like anyone that steps up to the challenge, especially when it's Kennedy Blades.
Yeah, well, she's a gamer for sure. I mean, obviously Kenny Blades is, but I mean Nugent is, and that's good. Good to see. Um, it's good that that Oklahoma State as a club took those matches. I'm surprised about the Mesa match, but as you said, there were some athletes that were not in the lineup. But it's and kudos to Iowa for hosting this. I think it's a good thing, and Oklahoma State's. I just saw some announcement they're building a new wrestling facility for a staggering amount of money. So maybe they'll find some money to get a Division I women's program going. Hopefully at some point.
Upcoming this week, Grandview versus Iowa live.
Women's wrestling is the fastest growing movement in America. And on December 11th, it steps onto the national stage. For the first time ever, NCAA women's wrestling comes to television as the top-ranked Iowa Hawkeyes face powerhouse Grandview University. History, momentum, opportunity. This is more than a meet. It's a moment. Join us December 11th at 8 on Iowa PBS and be part of the movement.
It's going to be live on Iowa PBS, so make sure you tune in on that. That's going to be exciting. I love that they are promoting that. There's 3 women's duels on Iowa PBS this year, and excited to be part of that.
That's great. We're getting a little more airtime. ESPN, did the national duels. It's really good to see, some of these, major, big networks. I mean, Iowa Public Television's, big in Iowa. It's great that they're picking that up and that'll be on the YouTube channel. So it's all happening. It is. Awareness is coming. The sport's growing, and it's all moving in the right direction.
Yui Sasaki back down to 50 kilograms. Emperor's Cup. This is like Christmas time for Scott D. Beck. He loves this. He loves the process of Japan and what kind of team they're going to build. They didn't have their A team, and they still won at the 2025 World Championships. Now they're moving into the Olympic trend. Now they're really gearing up for 2028. Yui Sasaki back down to 50.
I don't fully understand all the nuances, and they seem to change sometimes about the qualification process. There's the Emperor's Cup and the Meiji Cup. Normally, if you win both, you make the team. If you win one, you lose one, you have a wrestle-off. But I don't know exactly what credit they give for repeating world or Olympic champ. That seems to change. But basically, if Sasaki at 50, Kyuka said she's going back up to 55 for this tournament. So I don't know, is that because Akuno won the Worlds again for a fourth and she's got some advantage? But you'll have that at 55, as is Makaida's going 55 in that. 57, you're going to have Fujinami, which is going to be tough. I don't know who's going 59, if it's Sakurai, whatever. Then at 62, Onishi said she's going up to 62, who's the current world champ. They give Matoki, who's the current Olympic gold medalist and world champ. And then you're going to have Ozaki's going to try again at 62 going down, but she's been a world champ at 65 to 68, I believe. Definitely at 68. I think she's won at both. And then at 60, the next weight you're gonna, then you're gonna have Ami Ishii's coming back, who's a world champ, and Miwa Morikawa. Sorry, I was stumbling over that. Morikawa is won another world title, so she's going to be there competing with Ishii. And then you have Yuka Kagami's coming back at 76. So they're going to be stacked. And that's not even talking about the the U23 and all the junior world champs that are, I mentioned Anishi, but and Ito, but a bunch of other ones are coming up. So they're going to be very good. It'd be interesting to see how all the nuances play out. But I am a big fan of the Japanese team. Obviously, I'm a fan of the U.S. team, but as a fan of Japanese culture and a fan of Japanese wrestling, I am excited to see what they do and see this tournament.
2 things to end the show. Fort Hays State deserves some love. They are ranked number 10 in the NWCA poll. They are a second-year program. They're on the rise. I think we've been enamored, rightly so, with Grand Valley State, but I think what Fort Hays State has done to build a winning program is impressive. It's a D2 program in Kansas, so pay attention to them. They have some good wrestlers, and you just want to make sure that you don't let someone slip under the radar. And they're under the radar a little bit, and they deserve more shine.
Well, hopefully they're less under it now, and they'll get on mine a little bit more.
And to close this out, as we did last show, let's talk about a program you've never heard of. Maine Maritime, a D3 program in Castine, Maine. The town is a population of 1,200. Lamar Reed is the head coach, 8 women on the team. I just like knowing that there is a women's wrestling program in Maine. Congratulations on that. And I just love that we have programs throughout the country and in spots that we might not typically think of.
And I will say this: there are a bunch. I have friends a friend whose daughter goes to the Maritime Academy, and another one who did. These Maritime Academies are great, great schools, and it is a career path that is massively in demand. And when they graduate college, they could have a pick of a litter of well-paying jobs that are in high demand. So just if some athletes are thinking about stuff, look at the Maritime Academies.